You think the Arctic is just frozen silence? Imagine being completely alone and hearing someone call your name from the whiteout. Tonight, you'll hear two true encounters that will make you question what's real and what's hunting you in the cold. I never believed the stories about ghost stations until I heard the garbled voice on 142.7 megahertzes. My name is Jake Mercer, freelance search and rescue pilot, ex-US Air Force. I mostly do supply runs to remote scientific outposts in Greenland these days, but I was contacted last week by a private expedition outfit. They claimed to have intercepted a distress signal from a long-abandoned base in Antarctica called Station K-17. According to their records, K-17 was an informal U.S.-funded meteorological station quietly shuttered in the early 1980 seconds, located on a remote shelf of ice just inland from the coast near the Antarctic Peninsula, the same peninsula where the collapse of the Larsen B ice shelf in 2002 drastically altered ice flows and geography. The expedition thought the transmission must be a hoax, or worse, interference. They hired me to fly in, record what I could, and if nothing else, confirm the GPS coordinates, salvage any valuable data, then burn the place down and leave. I accepted partly for the pay, mostly because I needed closure. I'd failed to rescue a downed helicopter crew years ago. The guilt still lingers. This was my chance to atone. The contract didn't specify I had to believe in ghosts. The moment I landed on the ice, though, I felt the cold seep into my bones in a way I hadn't anticipated. The wind didn't howl, it whispered. There was a hush that swallowed sound, a silence so absolute I could hear the crackling static in my own earpiece. The surface was an endless field of blue-white ice shards, snow dunes shaped by katabatic winds, stretching to nothing. My skis crunched sharply when I walked toward the coordinates. Satellite imagery showed nothing, just an expansive snow plain. But about 3 miles inland from the craggy coastline, I saw a rectangular platform jutting from the ice, half buried in drifts. A rusted metal ladder led down through a hatch. I hooked my harness and rappelled. I landed on a narrow corridor, dim lights flickering with life. My headlamp picked out a dusty sign. K-17 Meteorological Station, established 1969. The air was weird, too warm, too still. My breath didn't condense. The temperature read 4 degrees Celsius. I double-checked the thermometer. Outside, it was 35 degrees Celsius. I radioed command. Base intact. Interior temperature off the charts. Beginning sweep. Static replied. No reply from command. Inside, the corridors were lined with dusty lockers, ration crates labeled U.S. Government Survey, classified, geophysical data. There were bunks with thin foam mattresses, a small kitchen, a radio room filled with antique gear tape, reels, HF transceivers, a wall-mounted map of Antarctica, dotted with handwritten coordinates. On the wall, someone had drawn in charcoal a crude outline of a figure humanoid, but with limbs too long, head tilted unnaturally. Next to it, scribbled in shaky cursive, "It watches from the ice. Don't answer." I took photographs, recorded temperature, logged every detail. I found a small cassette tape in the radio room, labeled Last Log, the 2nd of February 1984, 3:17. I pressed play. A crackle, then a male voice, ragged, low. "If anyone finds this, we made a mistake." They know we're here. The ice is moving. They move under the shelf. We can't stop them. We can't run. We are the shelf now. Then, static. Then faint, distant, sobbing. The hair on my neck stood. I rewound, played again, same message. I looked out through the thick glass window at nothing, no horizon, only swirling white. It struck me. This station had no more right to have functioning power than a corpse has to bleed. The generator room was half flooded, cables frayed, but the lights still hummed. The tapes played. The thermometer fluctuated between 3.8 degrees Celsius and 4.1 degrees Celsius. My radio earpiece suddenly crackled. At first I thought it was just wind interference, but then a voice. Soft, distant, like someone calling across a frozen wasteland. Jake, Jake. It called my name. It didn't sound human, not exactly, but I recognized the cadence. My pulse quickened. I snapped off the radio, heart hammering. I pressed record on my video camera. Outside, through a small porthole, I saw in the swirling snow a dark shape hunched, maybe 15 feet tall, then gone. I tried to open the hatch to climb out frozen shut. I pried, kicked, but the mechanism wouldn't budge. I radioed the expedition crew static, tried my satellite phone, no signal. I was alone. The station seemed alive. The hum from the machinery was low, but constant, like a heartbeat. My rational mind kept repeating, generator, short circuit, heaters, pressure leak, but nothing made sense. The heaters should have died decades ago. I returned to the radio room, heart pounding. The final entry typed, dated the 2nd of February 1984. They were beneath the ice. We couldn't drill deep enough. They came through old cracks. No sense now. We are ice. Transmission starts in 60 seconds. I looked at the clockwork radio transmitter on the wall. It was active, a countdown timer blinking 0. I killed the power. The lights flickered. Outside, the hum rose. The floor vibrated slightly, like footsteps stomping on the metal beneath. My boots shook. I unholstered my pistol, useless in Antarctica, but I held it anyway. I crawled toward the hatch and froze. The porthole glass was growing opaque from the inside, frost forming but from inside out. A shape materialized behind it, featureless, pale, limbs, long and disproportionate, exactly like the charcoal sketch. As I watched, thick ice crystals spread across the glass, obscuring it. I pounded the hatch. No response. Then the temperature gauge dropped rapidly from 4 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius in a few seconds. The warmth drained away. My breath steamed violently. The lights dimmed, then died. The hum stopped. Silence, thicker than ever. I whispered, "Hello." No echo. My radio earpiece buzzed static, then briefly, again. Jake. Then nothing. My Glock, hot in my hand. I sat against a wall, breathing shallow, waiting. Maybe for rescue, maybe for them. That's where I found myself, when I realized my knee was bleeding not from injury, but from frostbite forming, where my leg pressed against the cold floor. I turned on my headlamp one last time. The beam landed on something pinned to the wall, a single sheet of heavy-duty paper, scorched at the edges. In bold black ink, "They don't come for bodies, they come for you." I snapped a photo. Then I pressed end on the station's main console. I'm writing this now, using my satellite tablet. I don't know if anyone will ever read it. I don't know if rescue will come. All I know is I'm not leaving. Not until I see them. Not until I understand what I awoke under the ice. I never believed in the supernatural. I have no reason to, but I have every reason now to fear it. The wind outside still whispers. The ice still shifts. I refuse to burn this place, though I came here for exactly that. I refuse to let the expedition wipe the record clean. Because what happened to Station K-17 is real. And if I destroy it, I destroy proof. I patched my knee as best I could, wrapped it in thermal gauze, and taped a field bandage around my thigh. It stung. My breath came shallow and sharp. I tried to calm myself, rationalize. Maybe someone set up new heaters. Maybe there was geothermal activity. After all, near the Antarctic Peninsula, you can get unusual thermal vents beneath the ice. The collapse of Larsen B in 2002 caused massive rearrangements. Maybe a slab shifted, cracked, letting some warm salt water up. But the heater logs, the carbon copies, the radio tape running after decades, that defied logic. I crawled to the radio console, repowered it using spare battery packs from my emergency kit. It flickered, then roared alive. I keyed the transmitter. If anyone hears this, Jake Mercer, over. I'm alive inside Station K-17. I need evac coordinates 67 degrees, 23S, 60 degrees, 14W. Static. Then a second, deeper voice. They were beneath the ice. Then, silence. I tried the satellite phone, no signal. My battery was dying. I wrapped myself in a thermal blanket in the hallway. The walls creaked as the metal contracted in the cold. I remembered the log's last words. We are ice. I thought, maybe they were right. Maybe whatever they are isn't something foreign. Maybe it's us. Something about the isolation, the pressure, the cold, the waiting, fragments of mind. Maybe the base crew fractured under strain. Some people say that extreme isolation in Antarctica causes hallucinations, but this was more than hallucination. In the morning, I woke to silence. No hum, no whisper. The hatch remained frozen shut. I pressed my ear to it. Nothing. Outside, though, I heard cracking. Heavy, deliberate, like ice shifting under weight. I crawled to a porthole and turned on the headlamp. The beam cut through a roiling blizzard and landed on a blank expanse of white. Nothing. No horizon. Just whiteness. Then I saw footprints. Huge footprints, at least 2 foot wide, each leading away from the station into the storm. They weren't there the night before. They were fresh. They led toward the darkness beyond the swirling snow. And they ended abruptly, as if something just vanished. I froze. My heart pounded. The station door creaked behind me. I turned. Nothing. But the smell hit me. Damp, rotting ice, and something metallic. Blood? I gagged. I backed away, reached for my pistol. No bullets left. I realized then what the charcoal sketch meant. They didn't come for the bodies. They came for you. Me. I ran. The corridors twisted. Doors where there had been none. Shaded hallways. Wrong angles. The station interior was no longer consistent. It felt wrong, like a memory warped. I reached the ladder up to the hatch. It was gone. In its place, a blank wall of steel. I turned the corner and nearly vomited. On the wall was a smear of frost and red, a handprint, human-sized. Then another, overlapping. The outlines were crisp. Then footprints, booted huge and dragging. I leaned close to the smear. I closed my eyes. I heard breathing, not mine. Breathing slow, wet, raspy. I looked up, the ceiling vents had frost forming inside out again. Slowly, tendrils of frost spread downward like fingers. The breathing grew louder, closer. I stumbled backward, slipped, hit my head. Darkness. When I came to, the station was silent again. The lights were gone. The temperature read something impossible. 60 degrees Celsius. My thermal suit was ice-crusted. The walls slick with frost. I crawled to the radio room, hoping for batteries, hoping for signal. Nothing. I collapsed beside the tape deck. On the floor lay a single tape unlabeled. I picked it up. My fingers numbed. I pressed play. The tape was empty, static. Then just a long silence. Then a whisper. "We found him." My stomach clenched. I turned off the player, rose slowly, my head pounding. I used the last of my battery to send one final data burst, coordinates, video logs, audio files to the satellite uplink with a message: "If I die here, know that I tried." Know what I found? I taped the letter to the console. "To whoever recovers this, they are older than the ice. They were beneath the shelf when you first set foot on the continent. They will climb again." I armed the transmitter for a full power broadcast. I keyed it, a 30-second loop. The words, "We are still here. They found us," over and over. Then I walked into the blizzard. I turned off my headlamp, laid on the snow, face pressed against ice crystals so cold they burned. I closed my eyes. I listened. The whispering wind, the subsurface groan. I felt presence around me, beneath me, above me. I couldn't see. I couldn't think. I just felt. And for once, I felt real fear. Not the fear of dying. The fear of being forgotten, of becoming part of the ice, of joining them. The next morning, a Chilean icebreaker found wreckage from what looked like a small plane. Some distance off the shoreline, but no bodies. No wreckage consistent with any aircraft. Only 2 backpacks and a thermal blanket, torn and frozen. My SAT tablet was inside, its battery drained, the last screen still lit. A photo of a frigid window smeared in frost, and the message, "They don't come for bodies. They come for you." There was no distress call, no record. The tablet was hypothermic. The expedition team who hired me went silent. The coordinates of Station K-17 were scrubbed from their logs. The transcripts I sent to satellite uplink were overwritten. Officially, I never existed. But sometimes, when the wind howls outside my window, I swear I hear whispers. And sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up drenched in sweat, eyes darting, seeing those long limbs in the corner shadows. I don't know whether I'm crazy. Maybe I died on the ice that night. Or maybe I'm still there, under the shelf, waiting, listening. Do me a favor. If you ever come across any old explorer's log from Antarctica, check the date, the 2nd of February 1984. If you find mention of a base called K-17, if you find a cassette labeled Last Log, play it and listen, because they were beneath the ice, and one day they will climb again. My name is Daniel Haskins, and for 6 years I worked as an atmospheric technician in Whiteout, Alaska, the northernmost town in the United States. People always imagine Alaska as forests, mountains, maybe moose wandering through your yard. But Whiteout isn't that kind of place. It's flat, endless tundra stretching into the Beaufort Sea, where winter doesn't feel like a season, it feels like an entity, a presence, a consciousness. For 67 days straight each year, the sun never rises, only darkness, polar wind, and the kind of cold that gnaws at your bones. I took the job for a stupid reason. I thought it would help me escape the grief after my older brother Mark froze to death on Denali in 2018. They found his climbing harness and pack, but not his body. Even after the recovery team searched for weeks, all they brought back was a torn glove and a recording from his helmet camera that ended abruptly in a swirl of snow. I kept imagining him still out there, somewhere on the mountain, buried under 20 feet of ice. My therapist said isolation wouldn't fix grief, but I ignored her. Instead, I convinced myself that by studying Arctic storms and whiteout events, I could somehow make sense of what killed my brother. That's how I ended up at the NOAA research station, a few miles outside Whiteout, alone on night shift during the polar winter. No backup, no sunshine, just me, the instruments, and the frozen world, stretching for hundreds of miles. The story I'm about to tell you happened in 2023, during a whiteout so severe, the locals still talk about it. They compare it to the Great Arctic Cyclone of 2012, when a storm so massive it could be seen clearly from space churned over the Arctic Ocean for nearly 2 weeks. That storm broke sea ice records and destroyed multiple climate monitoring buoys. But what happened in 2023 wasn't just weather. It was something else. Something that had been seen before, but rarely spoken about. The Inupiat have stories, ancient stories, about figures that appear in the snow during blizzards, mimicking lost travelers, calling them by name, luring them into the white. My neighbor, an elder named Anurak, once told me, sometimes the storm has a face, sometimes the whiteout walks. I didn't understand at the time. I do now. The first time I saw him was during a routine instrument check. The wind was already picking up, and the temperature had dropped to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. I walked toward the remote anemometer tower, half a mile from the station. Even with my headlamp, I couldn't see more than 20 feet ahead. Snow whipped sideways, a curtain of white. My radio hissed with static. Then the static warped, and I heard my name. Daniel. It didn't sound like my supervisor. It sounded distorted, stretched out like someone speaking while shivering uncontrollably. I stopped. Who's on the channel? No answer, just the wind. I kept walking, boots crunching through hard snow. At the tower, I adjusted the frozen vane, knocked ice off the sensor, then turned back toward the station. Through the whiteout, I saw a dark shape. A person, standing perfectly still, maybe 200 feet away. I lifted my headlamp. The beam barely reached him, but enough to see he was facing me, not moving, just watching. Hey, I shouted into the wind. Do you need help? No response. He didn't raise a hand, didn't shift his weight, didn't even sway with the wind. He was wrong. I started walking toward him, hand hovering over my emergency beacon. But with every 10 steps I took, I realized something that made my skin crawl. He wasn't getting any clearer. It was like the distance between us never changed, like he was waiting inside the storm itself. Then my radio crackled again. Daniel. My breath hitched. The voice on the radio sounded exactly like Mark. My dead brother. I froze. Mark? The figure in the distance tilted its head, slowly, unnaturally. Then the whiteout thickened, swallowing him completely. I sprinted back to the station, stumbled inside, slammed the door, and tore off my frost-covered mask. My heartbeat was so intense, I heard it in my ears. I tried the radio dead. I checked the perimeter cams, nothing but swirling snow. I told myself it was just a hallucination from the cold. But later that night, around 3 a.m., I checked the footage again and froze. On camera 2, fixed toward the anemometer path, I saw a dark figure standing in the exact spot I'd seen him earlier, but the timestamp was from 2 hours before I walked out. As if he had been standing there, waiting. The next day, I asked around town if anyone had seen strangers near the station. People avoided eye contact. One older hunter muttered under his breath, "Sikatik, the one who walks in the white." I didn't know the word, so I asked Anorak. She made me tea, sat me down, and in the dim glow of her oil lamp she said, "There are old stories of a man who appears in the whiteout. He has no shadow. He has no breath. He waits for those who walk alone. He follows them, and if he calls your name, you must never answer." I felt a chill deeper than the Arctic wind. I didn't tell her that the thing didn't just call my name, he called it in my dead brother's voice. That night, the whiteout worsened. Winds up to 60 miles per hour. Drifts building against the station walls. The air pressure dropped so suddenly it set off alarms. I barely slept. Every time I drifted off, I heard the wind outside scraping across the metal like fingernails. At 4:10 a.m., the motion alarm went off. I stumbled to the monitors. Camera 3, facing the generator shed, showed a tall, unmoving silhouette in the blizzard. Taller than any person, shoulders too broad, limbs slightly too long. My blood froze. I zoomed in, digitally useless in that level of snow. But as I stared, the silhouette tilted its head exactly like before. Same slow, unnatural angle, like it was studying me through the camera. Then the generator lights flickered once, twice, and went out. The station dropped into darkness. The screens went black. Only the emergency backup kicked in, humming weakly. Then, in the pitch-black corridor behind me, I heard footsteps crunching on ice inside the station, coming closer, slow, heavy, deliberate. I backed toward the control room door, heart in my throat. "Hello?" My voice echoed off the walls, thin and trembling. No answer, just those slow, careful steps. Then a whisper, not through the radio this time, but directly behind me, right at my ear. "Daniel." I spun around, shining my flashlight, but there was no one. Only frost forming on the inner window of the corridor. Frost creeping in patterns almost like fingerprints, almost like something pressing its face against the glass from the outside. Except the frost was forming from the inside out. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By sunrise, or what should have been sunrise, the whiteout had worsened. Utiajvik was cut off. No one could reach me. And I knew, in the deepest part of my bones, that the man in the whiteout wasn't finished with me yet. Because when I finally worked up the courage to check the cameras again, the snow briefly cleared just enough for me to see him standing only 50 feet from the station door. And this time, he wasn't facing the tundra. He was facing me. And this time, he had my brother's face. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. The figure didn't move, didn't sway, didn't breathe. But the face, the shape under the hood, it was Mark, my older brother. The same square jaw, The same narrow nose, even the same faint scar above his left brow from when he wiped out on his skateboard at 13. My pulse hammered. It couldn't be him. Mark had died on Denali. They found his harness embedded in ice. His body was never recovered. He wasn't standing outside my station. He couldn't be. I blinked hard, zoomed in further even though the snow distorted everything. The face flickered, and for a split second, his features stretched unnaturally wide, like a mask bending over something that didn't understand how to be human. Then the whiteout swallowed him again. I backed away from the monitor, legs shaking. The backup generator hummed weakly, flickering every few seconds. I grabbed my parka, clipped my emergency beacon to my belt, and checked the satellite transmitter still dead. The storm was too strong. I was trapped. I made myself a rule years ago after Mark's death. Never panic in a storm. So I forced myself to focus. I needed heat, power, visual confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. I had to get to the generator shed. I suited up, pulled my hood tight, and stepped into the whiteout. The wind slammed into me instantly, a wall of frozen knives. I leaned into it, boots crunching into drifts up to my knees. The world was gone. No horizon, no sky, no ground. Only white. Like walking inside a blank sheet of paper. The station disappeared behind me in seconds. I tethered my safety line to the handrail posts and followed it blind. Halfway to the shed, the wind changed, suddenly silent, then booming, then whispering like voices overlapping. I heard footsteps behind me, soft at first, then louder. I refused to turn around. "Not real," I whispered. "Just the wind. Just the damn wind." But the footsteps grew faster, closer, crunching hard through the snow. I reached the generator door, yanked it open, slammed it behind me, and locked it. The footsteps stopped the moment the latch snapped shut. I stood with my back pressed against the metal door, breathing hard. The generator room smelled like diesel and iron. Familiar, safe, except frost was forming on the inside of the door again, like something cold was leaning against it from the other side. I swallowed and forced myself to focus on the generator. The main line had tripped, probably ice buildup on the intake vents. I cleared them, replaced a blown fuse, and restarted the ignition cycle. The generator rumbled back to life. Lights flickered. Warmth seeped back into the room. But as soon as the hum stabilized, I heard something over the engine, a slow dragging sound on the roof, like fingertips scraping across metal. I shut my eyes. The roof creaked. Then, footsteps, heavy ones, moved from one side of the shed to the other. The weight shifted, then stopped right above me. My breath trembled. The metal groaned again, then silence. I waited 5 minutes before stepping back out into the storm, gripping my tether line like a lifeline. The wind was worse, snow blasted sideways, but as I neared the station, I noticed something horrifying. The footprints in the snow. They weren't mine. They weren't from any boots I recognized. Some were human-shaped. Others were longer, stretched, as if someone had taken a normal footprint and pulled it like taffy. And all of them followed my path exactly, tracking me. When I reached the station door, I saw something carved into the ice on the window. Not scratched, carved. Letters, deep, jagged. "Let me in, Daniel." I stumbled back so hard I fell into a drift. The wind swallowed my scream. I crawled up, tore the door open, dove inside, and locked it. The moment I did, the entire metal frame vibrated. Once, A single pound heavy enough to rattle the glass, then silence. I backed into the control room, shaking uncontrollably. The cameras flickered online again. I cycled through them, one by one. Camera 1 only snow, Camera 2 snow, Camera 3 static, then Camera 4 facing the old ice ridge. Through the storm, barely visible, stood a tall, thin figure, taller than before. Shoulders wrong, head too narrow. It wasn't my brother now. It was something else, something wearing his face like a mask it was tired of holding up. As I watched, the figure raised a hand and pointed directly at the camera, at me. Then the image warped, static swallowed the screen, and every monitor went black. I backed away, heart thundering, shaking so violently I could barely stand. The temperature in the station dropped again. I watched frost spread across the metal walls like veins. My breath fogged the air. Then footsteps echoed in the hall, slow, deliberate, inside. I grabbed a flare gun from the emergency kit, my hands trembling, and crept down the dark corridor. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice echoed from ahead, a voice I knew better than my own. "Danny, help me." Mark, his exact voice, his exact tone. The way he used to say my name when we were kids, and he wanted me to follow him somewhere we weren't supposed to go. My throat tightened. "Mark?" The voice answered immediately, too immediately. "I'm cold, Danny." I took a step forward, then stopped. The corridor in front of me shifted, just slightly, like the shadows stretched, and something moved in the dark. Something tall, lean, wrong. I aimed the flare gun ahead, hands shaking. "Show yourself," I whispered. Silence. Then a hand appeared in the hallway, a human hand, pale blue, frostbitten, shaking violently. Mark's hand, his old climbing glove torn at the wrist. "Danny, please," the hand beckoned, slowly, inviting me forward. A tear slipped down my cheek, half grief, half terror. But then something clicked. The hand was shaking, yes, but not from cold. The shaking had rhythm, like it was mimicking, repeating, not understanding the movement. I lifted the flare gun. The hand froze, completely still, not trembling anymore, as if the thing wearing my brother's skin realized it made a mistake. I pulled the trigger. The flare erupted down the corridor, bathing everything in violent red light. And for a fraction of a second, just one, I saw it. A figure towering over 7 feet. Skin like stretched ice. No mouth, no nose, only a hollow cavity where a face should be. And inside that cavity, my brother's face, pressed against the inner surface like something trapped behind glass. Eyes bulging, mouth open in a silent scream. The creature recoiled, its limbs bending backward as the flare burst against the far wall. I ran. I don't remember how long I sprinted. Seconds. Minutes. I barricaded myself in the comms room, shoved a metal cabinet against the door, and collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Outside the room, the creature's footsteps moved slowly up and down the hall. Sometimes faint, sometimes right against the door. It didn't need to rush. It knew I couldn't leave. By morning, if you could call that dim polar twilight morning, the storm reached peak intensity. NOAA later recorded gusts near 80 miles per hour, one of the strongest whiteouts in UT Ojvik in decades, the perfect hunting ground for something that lived inside the storm. I checked the monitors again once emergency power returned. All but one were dead. Camera 3 flickered to life. For a second, I saw only snow. Then, through the vortex of white, a face pressed against the lens. My brother's face, smiling, but not with his eyes, with something else behind them. A crackling sound echoed from the monitors. Then his voice, "Danny, you found me!" Then the power surged, and every monitor exploded into static. By the third day, rescue teams reached the station after the storm broke. They found the place destroyed, windows shattered from inside, frost covering walls, every camera smashed, every recording corrupted. And they found me outside, half buried in snow, clutching my jacket to my chest, repeating the same sentence over and over until my voice went hoarse. He wasn't alone in the storm. They treated me for hypothermia and severe exhaustion. I survived. But sometimes, late at night, when wind rattles my windows, I hear my brother's voice on the gusts, whispering, calling my name. And every winter here in Alaska, when the first whiteout rolls across the tundra, someone reports seeing a man standing alone in the storm, tall, motionless, watching, wearing a familiar face, and always calling someone by name. If the whiteout ever comes to your town, promise me something. Don't look into the storm. Don't follow the voice. And if someone you lost long ago calls out to you, don't answer. Because sometimes the storm doesn't just take people. Sometimes it brings them back, but they're never the same.